I'm starting up again with Herodian Book 1, Section 6. And this is the true story of Emperor Commodus. So if you've seen Gladiator, there is the fake story of Emperor Commodus. This is the real history of Emperor Commodus written by a contemporary. So I will begin with Section 6, and we will learn how Emperor Commodus lost the trust of the Roman Senate and how the assassination attempts of Commodus's life began. Trust me, this is a lot better than Gladiator 1. This is the true story. Here we go. For a short time, Commodus followed the guidance of his father's friends completely. They were continually at his side with sound advice, allowing only such free time as they considered sufficient for proper physical exercise. But some of the imperial household interfered and tried to corrupt the character of the young emperor. These were the parasites at his table and men who measured happiness in terms of their bellies and their depraved vices. They reminded Commodus of the soft life of Rome by telling him of the delightful pleasures to be seen and heard and recounting the great wealth of resources there. They were scathing about all the seasons of the year on the banks of the Danube, a region which produced no fruits of harvest and was always cold and foggy. "My lord," they said, "don't go on drinking this icy, muddy water while others are enjoying the hot springs and cooling rivers, or the warm mists and clear air, which are only to be found in Italy. By putting such ideas into the young man's head, they whetted his appetite for a taste of these pleasures. Without warning, he summoned his advisors and told them he had a longing to return home. But because he was ashamed to admit the seasons for such a sudden departure, he pretended that he was afraid that one of the wealthy nobles in Rome would seize the seat of empire and then make a bid for power from his fortified citadel by collecting forces and resources. He claimed there were enough ordinary people to muster a lot of specially selected young men. The counselors heard the young emperor putting forward his excuses with feelings of dismay as they gloomily bowed their heads. But the most senior of them, Pompeianus, who was related by marriage to Commodus through Commodus's eldest sister, said, "My son and my master, it is quite reasonable for you to want to go home. All of us are equally consumed by anxiety to see those we left at home. But the more important, urgent work here restrains our desires. You will have your enjoyment of the pleasures of the city after this for the rest of your life. Furthermore, Rome is where the emperor is. But to leave the war unfinished is not just dishonorable, it is dangerous. We shall put new heart into the barbarian who will accuse us not of longing to return home, but of retreating in panic. On the other hand, if you subdue them all and extend the northern empire to the ocean, it will be wonderful for you to return in triumph, leading home barbarian kings and governors as prisoners in chains. This was what made your Roman predecessors great and famous. Do not worry about anyone in Rome undermining your position. The senatorial nobility are here campaigning with you, and the whole strength of the army is here to protect your rule. All the reserves of the imperial treasuries are here as well, and your father's undying reputation has made the loyal trust of your subjects certain." Pompeianus tried to encourage Commodus with these words and to take a wiser course. And for a time, he did divert the young man from his intentions. Commodus was put to shame by the speech, to which he had no reasonable reply. He dismissed the council, saying that he would give closer consideration to his proper course of action in private. But at the constant urging of his personal attendants, he stopped taking the advice of his council and set out instructions by letter allocating the control of the Danube campaign to trustworthy commanders, with orders to check the incursion of the barbarians while he announced his own return to Rome. The commanders carried out their tasks and soon either reduced most of the barbarians by force of arms or easily persuaded them to form treaties of alliances by offers of large subsidies. Since barbarians are naturally avaricious, they provide for their necessities of life by completely fearless foraging raids or else by bargaining for peace at a high price. Commodus realized this and met the barbarians' demand with an exorbitant sum of money in order to buy his peace of mind. Section 7. As Commodus's withdrawal became public knowledge, there was a great deal of unrest in the army. They all wanted to accompany him back to the pleasures of Rome and have done with the hard life of war. As the news circulated and messengers arrived in Rome with reports of the emperor's homecoming, the people there were overjoyed and had high hopes for the visit of the new emperor, expecting the young man to take after his father. The journey home was completed by Commodus with the enthusiasm of a young man. Everywhere, as he passed through the cities on his journey, he was given a royal reception. Making his appearance to the festive crowds, he was hailed as the darling of the people when they saw him. As he drew nearer to Rome, the whole Senate and population of the city were so anxious to be the first to see their new noble emperor that they could not restrain themselves from coming out quite a distance from the city to meet him, carrying garlands of bay leaves and all the seasonal flowers that they could bring. Their desire to see him was a sincere expression of their emotions because they felt he had been born and brought up in their midst, an emperor of the fourth generation and a Roman patrician. His father's family background included prominent senators, while Faustina, his mother, who became empress, was the daughter of Antonius Pius, the granddaughter of Hadrian on her mother's side, and actually traced her line back to Trajan as her great-grandfather. Besides this ancestry and the fact that he was in the prime of his youth, Commodus was of a striking appearance, with a shapely body and a handsome, manly face. With his eyes were burning and flashing. His hair was naturally fair and curly. And when he went out in the sunlight, it gleamed with a brilliance that some people thought gold dust was shattered on it before public appearance, though others considered it supernatural and said that a heavenly halo was shining round his head. On his cheeks, the first growth of hair was beginning to appear as well. This was the emperor the Romans saw as they welcomed him with full acclamations, showering him with the garlands and flowers. On his entry into Rome, after going up to the temple of Jupiter and to the other temples, he made his grateful acknowledgments to the Senate and the soldiers that had been left stationed in Rome for the loyalty they had shown. Then he went to the palace. Section 8. For a few years, Commodus paid full respect to his father's friends, acting in every case on their advice. But after he had taken over full control of the empire, he gave the command of the Praetorian Guard to Perennius, an Italian with a fine military record. For this reason, a particularly good choice for Praetorian prefect. But Perennius took advantage of the tender age of the emperor and began to relieve him of the responsibilities and cares of his office by persuading him to spend his time in a life of pleasure and drunkenness. Finally, in his uncontrollable desire for money, he took over total direction of the empire by himself. Because he was permanently dissatisfied with his existing possessions and had an inexhaustible yearning for what he did not yet own. His first action was to bring accusations against Marcus's advisors. Then he sowed suspicion in the young emperor's mind against his rich nobles so that he would get rid of them out of fear. This would then provide him with the opportunity and means to seize their property. Up to a point, young Commodus was restrained out of the respect for his father's memory and his advisors. But an event occurred whereby such moderation and control as he had so far shown was upset by a most unhappy, malevolent turn of chance. Commodus' sister Lucilla, the eldest member of the family, had been married to Lucius Verus, the emperor, whom Marcus had made his partner in the empire and his son-in-law. The marriage with Lucilla had been arranged by Marcus to bind Lucius firmly to his loyalty to the empire. When Lucius died, Marcus married Lucilla to Pompeianus, though she kept all the insignia of her imperial position. Commodus, like his father, allowed his sister to hold these privileges, that is, to take her place on the imperial seat at the theater, and to have the ceremonial fire carried before her. But with his own marriage to Crispina, precedence was bound to be assigned to the wife of the emperor. Lucilla was angered by this honor paid to Crispina, which she considered to be an insult to herself. She realized that her husband, Pompeianus, was devoted to Commodus, and so she did not communicate to him her intention to seize power. But she sounded out the feelings of a young noble called Quadratus, with whom she was alleged to have a secret liaison. Her continual bitter complaints about her rights of precedence soon persuaded the young man to conceive a plot, which turned out fatal for himself and the whole Senate. He persuaded a number of leading senators to join the plot, including a young man who was himself in the Senate called Quintianus, an extremely rash youth. The plan was that Quintianus should carry a dagger under his cloak, and when he found a suitable time and place, he should attack and kill Commodus. Quadratus asserted that he had taken care of all the other arrangements by distributing largesse. So Quintinianus hid in the entrance to the amphitheater, where he thought he would not be detected in the shadows. Drawing his dagger, he suddenly sprang out at Commodus and shouted out he had been commissioned by the Senate to kill him. But instead of stabbing Commodus first, he was seized by the imperial guard while he was wasting time delivering a speech and showing that he was holding a weapon. So he paid for this stupidity in giving away his intentions instead of acting, and thereby he allowed himself to be found out and caught, while Commodus was forewarned and took precautions. This was the first and foremost reason why young Commodus hated the Senate. The wound he had received was to his feelings by what was said. He never forgot the sound of his assailants' words, and regarded the whole Senate as his enemies. Perennius 2 was provided with valid evidence as a pretext for the action he was continually urging on Commodus, the extermination and degradation of the aristocracy. By seizing their property, he had no difficulty in becoming the wealthiest man of his day. He set in motion a thorough inquiry, as a result of which Commodus ruthlessly executed his sister, all the actual conspirators, and anyone upon whom the slightest suspicion was thrown. Section 9. After getting rid of everyone, including those whom Commodus feared, and those who were concerned for his safety as a demonstration of their parental affection, Perennius gained complete control and began to aim for the Principate itself. First, he persuaded Commodus to give the command of the Illyrian army to his sons, even though they were still young men. Then, while he himself amassed a vast sum of money to win over the allegiance of the army by large donatives, his sons secretly organized their forces in readiness for a coup d'etat after Perennius had murdered Commodus. But news of the plot unexpectedly leaked out at the festival the Romans celebrate in honor of Capitoline Jupiter. On this occasion, there are all kinds of artistic shows and athletic contests to see which the people flock to the capital. The emperor attends the festival and acts as judge jointly with other members of the priestly colleges, who are designed each year in rotation. This time, Commodus was attending the performance of celebrated actors and took his place in the imperial seat. The theater filled with people who went to the places in an orderly way, nobles to their special seats, and each person to the places allocated for him. A man ran out to the front of the stage dressed like a philosopher. That is, he carried his staff in his hand and had a wallet hanging around his half-bared shoulders. Before anyone could say anything to stop him, he stood in the middle of the stage, silenced the people with a gesture of his arm, and began to speak. Commodus, he said, this is no time for you to be enjoying yourself by spending your time at theaters and festivals. The sword of Perennius hangs poised over your head. Unless you take precautions against this danger, which is not just threatening but already here, you will be destroyed before you realize it. Here in Rome, he is collecting forces and money to use against you. In Illyria, his sons are bribing the army to support him. If you do not act first against him, you will be finished. It may have been just an uncanny piece of luck which drove the man to utter these words, or it may have been that as a completely unknown person before, he was trying to win himself a reputation or hoping to get a rich reward from the emperor for his information. Commodus was dumbfounded. Although everyone suspected that the words were true, they pretended not to believe them. Perennius gave orders for the man to be arrested and punished for his insane lies by being burned. Though the philosopher paid his penalty for speaking so fiercely out of turn, Commodus's companions and self-styled supporters, who had previously hated Perennius for his harshness and intolerably supercilious arrogance, judged this an opportune moment to try and bring a charge against him. As it turned out, Commodus was destined to escape the plot, while Perennius and his sons met a sorry end. For soon after, some soldiers came without the knowledge of Perennius' son, bringing some coins that had Perennius' portrait on them. They avoided Perennius even though he was Praetorian prefect, and exposed the secret plot to Commodus by showing him the coins for which they were richly rewarded. Since Perennius had no idea of what was happening, he was caught totally unawares when Commodus sent someone by night to behead him. Commodus also sent off some men immediately by a quicker route to arrive before news of the incidents, so that they could keep an eye on Perennius' son, while he was still uninformed about the events in Rome. With them went a friendly letter requesting him to return to Rome and saying that by this summons he could expect promotion. Perennius' son had no idea yet of the plans which had been prepared, nor of what had happened to his father. So when the messengers delivered the summons and said that Perennius had given the orders orally rather than in writing, because he thought the emperor's letter was enough, the young man accepted it as genuine. Though it was extremely hard for him to abandon his plans, incomplete, he left for Rome because he was confident of his father's power, which he thought still existed. But when he reached Italy, some men acting on instructions murdered him after the end of Perennius and his sons. Commodus appointed 2 Praetorian prefects because he thought it's safer to entrust so much power, safer than to entrust so much power to one man. A divided office, he believed, would diminish anyone's ambition for supreme power. And that is the end of section 9 of book 1 of Herodias, the true story of Emperor Commodus and the assassination attempts.